this might sound a bit misogynistic. She's not nagging anymore. She's not asking me to take the trash out anymore. She's cooking and cleaning again.
My shirts have been ironed.
Magically, gangbang porn, fantasy porn, violent porn, consensual non-consent, which is basically like a fantasy. These search terms are predominantly searched for by women, not by dudes. I've saved more fucking marriages than any marriage counselor ever has. I guarantee you that. And she just starts blowing me in the hot tub, and I can see the look on this guy's face. Oh shit, I've made a really, really bad mistake.
Going around the room fucking other people's wives, to me that seems very, very weird. Lionel Richie, dim the lights, stroke your hair.
Right.
That is me.
The way the guy would think in this scenario is like, oh, if I get into the swing of things, it means I'm going to get a bunch of women to suck my dick. Unfortunately, what actually happens is his wife ends up sucking a bunch of dicks, being tied up, being whipped, being choked, being spanked.
You're good friends with Andrew and Tristan Tate, innocent or guilty. How do you think it's going to end for them brothers?
I want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors, Gold Seal. I use their products every single day, and now I finally get to work with them. I use their products for anti-inflammatory, reduced anxiety, better sleep, and mental clarity. I'm going to put a link to their website in the description, along with a 10% discount code for you to take advantage of. Go and have a look at their website, see if there's anything in there for you. I hope you enjoy this week's episode, and good health.
Sterling.
How we doing?
Thanks for flying in.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I love coming back to the motherland.
Yeah, it's a long old flight. Now, I'm going to put a disclaimer out before we get into this conversation, before I start picking your brain as to what you do. Now, you're an ex-porn star. You're a sex coach. You help men that struggle with women on different levels. Now, whenever I have these conversations with people, I get a whole load of backlash. So here's my disclaimer. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I'm here to find out what Sterling does and why he's decided to do it and explore the mind of a man that's lived a very different life to me. So if you're easily offended and you don't want to listen about sex, respect, relationships, betrayal, porn addiction, and all the other stuff that goes with it, switch off now. No one's going to switch off.
Good disclaimer.
There it is. So, sex in a relationship. How important is that?
I think it's the thing that makes and breaks relationships. I think if you look at massive divorce rates that we have across basically all the Western countries, I think a big contributing factor to that is a lack of not just sex, but a lack of real sex. And what I mean by real sex is that since we've been kids, we've basically been fed this lie that, women are sugar and spice and all things nice. And, the whole, if you look at every rom-com that's ever been put in Hollywood, you look at TV shows like Friends and things like this, they portray this dynamic between men and women as one of men putting women on a pedestal, being very lovey-dovey, like laying down rose petals on the bed and caressing them and being very gentle and things like that. And what I see from my work is that has created this big gap between what women actually want in the bedroom and what men are giving women in the bedroom, and that they're not being dominant enough. They're not being actual men. They're not grabbing themselves by the balls, taking their woman with passion, which is women want. And the analogy I like to use all the time is imagine if you were a Roman legionnaire off slaughtering barbarians for a couple of years and you came back to Rome. How would you take your wife? What's that interaction going to be like?
It'll be pretty quick.
Well, it might be quick, but it's going to be passionate. It's going to be passionate. He's going to throw it down the bed. He's not going to be. It's not going to be the slow, gentle, lovey-dovey process. It's going to be animalistic. It's going to be passionate. It's going to be kind of barbarian-like. It's going to be machismo, And I think that's where I've helped a lot of guys is teaching them to not be afraid of doing that, because a lot of guys are worried about, especially younger guys, they're worried about catching a sexual assault allegation, a Me Too charge, things like that, by being a bit too handsy, by being a bit too rough and tumble with their woman. But the irony is that that's what they're looking for. Women are really, really fundamentally looking for a guy who's going to display that dominance and allow them to fall back into their natural submissive feminine state, which is where they want to be. Because right now women are running around in the modern world being in a very masculine frame of mind. They're working, a high-figure job. They're working an office job. They're working in a managerial position. They're taking responsibility all day. And then they come home to their partner and they're still in this really high-strung, stressful, masculine kind of headspace. They want a man to just help them turn it off, get them back into their natural feminine, just switch their brain off and let him take charge. And the bedroom does all that.
Well, this is interesting then, because you see, for me, I'm in a relationship and I'm very, very happy in that department. But if I was somebody listening to this, and a lot of people will probably find it hard to believe, shaven head, tattoos, rough and ready, but I wouldn't feel comfortable being that hands-on in the bedroom. I kind of enjoy making love.
Right.
So if I was to come to you and say, I'm really struggling with women, or, I can't make my partner climax, what should I do? If you was to say to me, well, go in there like a Viking and fuck the daylights out of her, I'd think, cool, blimey, I wouldn't feel comfy doing that.
Right.
So where do we go from there?
Yeah, a lot of guys, that's the first sort of stumbling block, is they feel like they're degrading their woman somehow by engaging in sex like that. They feel like they're disrespecting her by being a bit more aggressive and manhandling like that as well. And so I think the first thing is to realize that these are bullshit, self-imposed, false narratives. Like you're not being disrespectful or degrading to your woman by being passionate with her. If anything, you're showing her that she's like your muse. You're showing her that she's the muse for your lust. And you're letting her inspire that out of you. I think that's a better way of completely reframing that perception.
Do you encourage that kind of sex to men that are sort of pursuing different women to find the one, or do you encourage that for a man that's found the one?
It works for both. I think men will still marry the woman who's, they've got great sexual chemistry with. I think guys will very often marry the woman they've got great sexual chemistry with, or put a ring on her finger or whatever. And they're not purely selecting based off of, is she housewife material? Is she mother material? Is she all this sort of stuff? That is obviously a big factor in it. But sexual chemistry is so bloody important. I think it's even more important for the women than for the men to have that sexual chemistry. Because if a woman doesn't feel that spark with you, what ends up happening, and we see this again and again and again, is women who've waited till they're in their late 20s, early 30s to try and lock down a partner, is they're kind of doing it from a place of desperation, and they just lock down the first guy that'll say yes to them. And what ends up happening is they don't really have that passion for the guy, which means the sex isn't fantastic. He's not blowing her mind in bed. And so she slowly starts to get into this phase of just resenting him, ends up cheating with him, ends up divorcing him, take him to the cleaners, takes the kids and runs. Like we see this pattern again and again and again. And I have personally fixed these situations in long-term relationships, 20-year-plus marriages, by just injecting a bit of dominance back into the bedroom on the guy's side. I get emails verbatim saying, she's not nagging anymore. She's not asking me to take the trash out anymore. She's cooking and cleaning again.
My shirts have been ironed.
Magically, all of these things that guys want from their woman, but you can't get them through negotiation. You can't get them, even though that's what every marriage counselor will tell you. I've saved more fucking marriages than any marriage counselor ever has. I guarantee you that. Because they'll tell them, you have to sit down, you have to talk about your problems, you have to talk about your feelings. That doesn't do it. Like you can't negotiate. A good friend of mine, Royal Tomasi, has a great saying, you can't negotiate desire. So you can't sit there and negotiate. If I take the trash out, if I do this, if I do that, then I get a blowjob. Then she'll fuck me. Then she'll stop nagging. Then she'll do all these things. And it's just not how women work. We can't pretend that women are these hyper logical machines that we can put input A in and expect output C to come out of us. We've got to learn how to tap into their innate psychology. And I think that if we go far enough back, if we go back to being cavemen, if we go back to being hunter-gatherer tribes, nomadic tribes, what is the fundamental, underlying evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology going on there? It's cool. Dudes invading another tribe, taking their women, like killing the men, taking the women back to their tribe and incorporating them into their tribe. Now, it's not a nice thing to imagine. It's not a nice thing to discuss, but that's where we come from. And once you start looking at the search trends for women on websites like Pornhub, right, and you see the vast majority of searches for things like gangbang porn, like violent porn, even like fantasy porn, consensual non-consent, which is basically like a rape fantasy. These search terms are predominantly searched for by women, not by dudes. So why is that happening? Well, because, and it's not a conscious thought, it's just a subconscious part of their brain, their hindbrain, this very ancient animalistic side of the female brain is yearning for the guy who's just going to come along and take her. Now, obviously we do that. Well, I'm not saying anyone should be doing this, you know, in a non-consensual context, right? But I'm trying to give guys an understanding of like, why did 50 Shades of Grey become the best-selling book of like all time? Why? It was because women have an innate desire for this darker side of male sexuality, this very dominant, passionate, aggressive, you could say, side of male sexuality. And it presses a button deep in their psychology.
So for you to teach men what women want, you obviously need to know what women want. And by doing that, I'm assuming you've had to do a lot of research and you've had to get a lot of feedback from women, because this obviously isn't guesswork. So how have you researched what women want?
It wasn't me deliberately going out and researching. It was kind of like the research was just put in my face, like the experiences were put in my face. And this started when I was a straight male escort back in Australia. So I got involved. I was actually in the swingers scene for a bit, ended up meeting some women in the swingers. I was a single guy in the swingers scene. So I'd come in and, you know, I'd be the what was known as the bull in a party where I'd make my way around the room and have my way with other dudes' wives while they were sitting in the corner watching. And that progressed to me meeting a few girls in that scene who were escorts themselves. And then they turned around after this happened about 3 times over the course of about a year. I had 3 different ones say, "You should try this. You'd be pretty good at it. You should try this. You should try this." I said, "Fuck it. I'll give it a go." And what I started to see was my clientele was a very particular archetype of like late 20s, early 30s, maybe actually probably even closer to like mid 30s, high income, high net worth woman, you know, working a job like a high managerial, white collar job. And what she wanted more than anything else was to be just taken by a guy who she couldn't get anymore. Like she was the kind of guys that she wanted who were on her, let's say on her level at the office. They're dating the 18-year-old secretary. They're not dating her. So there's a discrepancy in her mind between like the kind of guy she wants to go after, but the kind of guy that'll actually, you know, find her attractive. So I was paid in that scenario to come in and fill in a fantasy, if that makes sense. The fantasy I'm fulfilling for her is attractive, intelligent, well-spoken guy is giving her his undivided attention, and he's taking her back to the hotel room and giving her that passion that she's been just yearning for so much. And I just got that experience time and time and time again, and women would, you know, open up about what they wanted you to do to them in the bedroom, because it's a transaction. There's no judgment there. And I'm being paid to be non-judgmental, so they can freely express what they want. And so I'd see that in the swinger scene. I'd see that as an escort, and then obviously when I eventually went into the porn scene, we didn't have so much of a direct impact on what we were shooting for a company, but when you hang out after the scene shot, when you in your own spare time, you know, your recreational activities, people would, of all people in the world, porn stars are the ones who are going to be the most open and honest about what they want done to them in the sack. And so you just see this again and again and again. And I ended up shooting for kink.com, who are like the world's biggest BDSM website. And it was a very consistent experience to have a new model come in and shoot for kink, who she shot regular guy-girl scenes, normal sex, like for every other company, and it's her first time shooting for kink.com. And we'd always do a consent interview before the scene started. And the interviewer just asked them, hey, why do you want to? What made you want to come and shoot for kink? And she's like, every time it was, I've fantasized about, being tied up, being whipped, being choked, being spanked. But if I fantasize about being in this very vulnerable position for forever, and I've wanted to shoot for kink.com for forever. I'm so excited. And then we do the scene. She's tied up. We're having a great time. She's just ecstatic in this unbelievable, like, euphoric headspace after this experience. And you just see enough of these instances again and again and again and again. And it's like, this isn't a coincidence. These aren't like one-offs. This is the rule. Like, this is what women are like.
Let me unpack a few things.
Cool.
Now, I'm sure when people see me interview guys like you or porn stars, I've interviewed Bonnie Blue, which I will talk to you about her, actually. It makes me wonder if people think that because I interview and touch base on this topic, if it's actually my kind of thing. The truth is, it really isn't. So it fascinates me, like being a bull in a sex party, going around the room fucking other people's wives. To me, that seems very, very weird. Like, that is just unfathomable. And then getting into kink porn, tying people up, choking them. It's like, you couldn't pay me enough to do that. I'm more into Lionel Richie, dim the lights, stroke your hair.
Right.
That is me. Yeah. So when I hear a man, like, that's just the norm, or a woman, I think, fuck me. Like, there is another world out there, which is what I like to explore. So going back to when you were the bull, going around a party, sleeping with other men's wives, did it at any stage feel just odd?
The first time I went to a party like that, I was pissing myself. I was like super, super nervous, incredibly nervous. I was like, I almost psyched myself out of walking in. I ended up walking in, and it was because my assumption, I think this would be like the default assumption of any guy going into that kind of a scenario is like, are the guys going to beat me up? Like, is the husband going to get angry and try to kick my ass? Because I probably would. If I was in that situation, I would. If a guy comes up to my missus and tries to have a crack at it, he's getting a fist. Like, okay, cool. So it makes sense that you'd be nervous in that situation. But what ended up happening was it was pretty much universally the dudes pushing their woman on you. It was like a couple would see you across the room, you go up and chat to them, or they come up and chat to you. And it was always the case of, if there was a mutual, if the guy respected you, if the guy didn't have a problem with you, hey, have some fun with my wife. It was always, in the swinger scene, that was always the case. It is not normal. I agree. I completely agree with you. That is not normal.
I mean, again, this blows my mind even more.
Right.
To actually watch another man sleep with the woman that I love, I'd kill him.
Yes. I dare say that is the healthy male response, right? Is to have that territorialism towards your woman. But in that scene, and I've been trying to kind of unpack why those guys are the way they are.
And how big is that scene?
I mean, where I was at the time, that was in Perth. You get a big party, you probably get about 40 people to a party on a weekend, like in a someone's big like apartment, like penthouse or whatever. Probably about 40 people in the party. So it's not a massive thing. Here in the UK, it's much, much bigger though.
Oh, really?
There's a big swinger scene in the UK. Yeah, it's massive.
Funny enough, I did interview two swingers, to which again it blew my mind, the dynamic of the whole relationship, and I thought, but horses for courses, and if they're not hurting anybody, and it's consensual, and they're both of an age where they're of sound mind, then I think, okay, fair play. I'm very interested.
I think what the trend tend to be, a couple in their mid 30s or plus was always pretty much maybe sometimes like big early 30s, but usually they've been in a relationship for quite a while. Maybe they had kids young and the kids have left home now. And so they've gotten into this state, like they'd kind of been monogamous for such a long time that they got to this point in their life where maybe sex wasn't really as exciting anymore. They wanted to spice things up. The kids are out of the house. There's no like strings attached. Like they can kind of experiment. And usually it's pretty much always the dude's idea. And this is a problem too, because usually the way the guy would think in this scenario is like, oh, if I get into the swinger scenes, it means I'm gonna get a bunch of women to suck my dick. Unfortunately, what actually happens is his wife ends up sucking a bunch of dicks because it's much, much easier for a woman. Like, it's like women getting access to men is like breathing. It's so easy. But for him to get access to other women in that scene, it's a lot. There's politics. There's a lot more work that has to be done.
It's when the cunning plan backfires.
It completely backfires. I remember going to a swingers club in Perth. I went there with a girl that she wasn't my girlfriend or anything like that, but she was a friend from the swinging scene. So we'd played at parties together. So she was a bit of fun. So we went to this club together, and we're sitting in a hot tub, and this couple gets into the hot tub with us. And we can tell instantly, we started chatting, so we figured it out, but I could pretty much tell instantly that they were brand new. Because he was like white. He was so nervous. And his missus was actually like being very social, being very friendly. So they jumped in the hot tub, started introducing themselves, started chatting and stuff. And the girl I'm with, was pretty aggressive. So she sort of kicked things off. She started making out with his wife. And then directed her towards me, and she just starts blowing me in the hot tub, and I can see the look on this guy's face go from like, oh, this is a bit nervous, but this could be exciting, to, oh shit, I've made a really, really bad mistake. Because he's in his first 10 minutes, his missus is blowing me in the fucking hot tub, and I could just see it on his. He just went pale. And I'm like, ooh, sorry, mate. Yeah, you shouldn't. You shouldn't have done. I didn't say this out loud because I was getting my dick sucked, but you shouldn't have done this.
Did you have like a chat afterwards and?
Yeah, I think afterwards, like
a debrief.
Yeah, put him aside. Like, look, this isn't for everyone, mate. Like, you should. And here's the thing. Like, the whole time I was in that scene, I was a single guy, so it was easy for me because I'm just bouncing around between, what we call unicorns, like the women, single women in that scene. We call them unicorns because you can't catch them. Like, they're so hard to find. So I'm bouncing around with them, or like, there's other couples that I played with, and so I'm seeing the misses here and there. But it's not like I'm just taking in this. I'm not really giving any vagina to the scene at all. I'm just taking it all. So I had this really weird, like a very unique perspective on the swinger scene, being the bull in it. And so I'm seeing this, like, there's guys like that who would go, yeah, instantly regret it, and then there was other guys who they absolutely loved it. There was like, they got off on seeing their missus with another, like, almost like it was their personal porno playing out in front of them. And I think that's, I've been trying to figure out why, like the psychology of that guy, like how does he get to that point? And I think it has to come down to pornography. I think it has to come down to like, yeah, porn use and what, because think about it for a second, right? If you're watching a porno, if you're literally, you're actually actively engaging in cuckoldry. You're watching another man have sex with a woman, from that third person.
See, when I was a lot younger, I had a porn addiction. And then something happened and I found it utterly repulsive and it made my skin crawl. I haven't watched porn for years and years and years. And I know how damaging it is. I know how disconnected you become from human beings. Right. I know how it will ruin your relationship, even friendships, and just normal connections that you take for granted and don't even think about that pornography is affecting it. So I would much rather people watch pornography than go out and fucking take advantage of somebody. It serves a purpose. And I would much rather, let's just say I've got a friend, a married friend, and I'm friends with them both. And they're going through a rocky patch. I would much rather them both start watching porn than cheat on each other and wreck a family. So it serves a purpose, but I know the industry is very dark, which I want to find out from you about in a minute. So let me put a pin in the porn, because you know what my stance on porn is now, and I know that you've entered that industry and you've left that industry. We'll find out why, but I want to go back for a few things about men. How bad is it for a man to feel rejection? What does that do to a man?
Sexual rejection in particular. I mean, all rejection is sexual rejection, right? In terms of, if you're asking a chick out and she rejects you, right? It's ultimately sexual rejection. And I've tried to explain this to women before, because women don't experience rejection the way that guys do. And when they have had a guy turn them down, it's usually it's super rare, and they're so flabbergasted by the experience they can't really process it properly. So when I've tried to explain it to women, here's how I've explained it. I've said, you've basically, every time you reject a guy, you've effectively just told him that his bloodline should die. That's kind of what you're doing. If you think about it, like you are not worthy of having sex with. You are not worthy of procreation. That is effectively what's being subcommunicated there by rejection. Developing the resilience towards rejection is like a really, really powerful thing for them. Because a guy is not going to get anywhere in life if he can't handle rejection. Because not just sexual rejection from women, but like if he needs to get out there and into the business world, he has to be able to face no's. If he's knocking on doors, he's cold calling or whatever, he's pitching people, he's going to have to face a lot of no's for every yes it gets. So developing that resilience to rejection is, I think, one of the most important skills a young man can develop.
I asked that question because I know people, not just one person. I know people that have been rejected by a woman years ago, and then they didn't dare go near another woman for years and years until they were approached. And I think, wow, it crippled you that badly.
This might sound a bit misogynistic, but I think if a guy in that situation, right, a little bit of healthy misogyny can help him. Okay, so I actually had a coaching call a few weeks ago, and a guy asked a very similar situation like this. He was getting rejected all the time, and he said, "What do I'm beating myself up, right? I'm getting rejected." It wasn't just one rejection. He was, asking girls out on dates, and they were either flaking on him or not showing up or whatever. And I'm like, look, why would you put so much stock into the opinion of a creature that can't keep a consistent opinion for 30 days of the month? Why would you care?
I'm looking forward to the comment section now.
I'm just saying. But that's what that's the phrase I would use as I'd call healthy misogyny. Because okay, it's not I'm not saying that to denigrate women. I'm saying that to help this guy reframe how important the opinions of women are to him. Because to him, it's the most important thing in the world. Because he hasn't been able to get over it, right? So he needs a really strong mental reframe in order to move on with his life. You telling that guy, "Oh, just be a nice guy, just pull yourself up by your bootstrap," that ain't gonna fix him. Because his worldview is so entrenched in seeking female approval, and he's put that up so high on his value system, is that women's approval is the be all and end all, that it has destroyed him ever taking that risk ever again. So we need to dismantle that value structure in his head so we can rebuild back a more healthy one that is good for his own self-esteem. Now, it doesn't mean he has to be a misogynist. It doesn't mean he has to be, he's not going to hate women and stuff like that. But that's just one example of a reframe that can actually help a guy get out of that situation. Because I think because that guy is not going to go on to hate women. He's going to go on to fear women.
This leads me on to my next question. So I also know guys that have been cheated on by a woman, but then they hate women. And I have these arguments with them. It's like, you cannot hate women because a woman has broke your heart. You can't start treating women like shit because one hurt you. Like, that's the way the mop flops. So how do we get people out? How do we get men out that mindset? Because at the moment in the UK, women are being treated appallingly. The crime rate against women is off the charts. I was raised by two women, so I love and adore them. So it triggers me. So when I hear a man hating on women, talking about them like they're pieces of shit, and when you get under the bonnet, it's because they've been previously hurt. How do we get these men out of that fucking stupid mindset? Because you'll also get hurt by a best friend too. Betrayal is betrayal.
Yep. For every guy who's been cheated on and he's had his heart broken and now he's developed that, like, some people might call it like red pill rage. This is a phrase that gets thrown out sometimes when guys start to learn about. They start to uncover a bit more of the truth of female nature and really understanding how women operate, what things they respond to, what they're capable of. That they're not sugar and spice and all things nice. That they can be, they can be a bit manipulative. They can be quite manipulative sometimes, emotionally manipulative. They can be cold if they've lost all respect for you, if they've lost all attraction for you, they will be very cold, and they'll do it with zero remorse. But tiger got stripes. Like, you wouldn't get angry at a tiger for trying to eat you, would you? It's its nature. So I'm going to approach a tiger with a bit more caution, be a bit more strategic, if I understand what a tiger's nature is, I think the same thing should be applied to women. They are fantastic. They are the purpose behind men's lives in a lot of ways. They make us get up in the morning and go and work, but they're still don't expect a woman to be something she's not. And I think that's what happens to a lot of guys. They get cheated on because they're told one thing. They're told that women they operate this way, but women actually operate a totally different way. They're told if you just work your 9 to 5, put food on the table, keep a roof over the head, be a loving, adoring husband, she will treat you right. She won't nag. She won't, disrespect you. She won't cheat on you. And that is just fundamentally not true, because all those things are well and good. And you should put food on the table. You should provide for them. You should be a loving, adoring husband. But at the same time, you have to make sure that she respects you and she is aroused and attracted to you. This is equally as important. And guys think that, oh, I've got a girlfriend now, I've got a wife now, I can forget all that stuff because the job is done. And the job is never done. You have to maintain that respect and that attraction. Otherwise, women can get cold and lose respect for you, and they will end up cheating on you.
That's a good word, respect. I understand the psychology between men and women, but you're the expert. So how does a man get a woman to respect him long term?
Boundaries. Having boundaries and enforcing boundaries. That's how you get anyone to respect you, right? Not just women.
But can you be accused of being coercive, manipulative?
Controlling. Everyone will accuse you of being controlling, right? We wouldn't have called a granddad or a great-granddad controlling. We call him a patriarch. We call him the head of the household, right? He's the authority figure in the household. For you to have authority and responsibility, rather, have to coexist, right? If the father of the household is responsible for the household, if he's responsible for making sure the lights stay on, making sure there's food on the table, making sure everyone's safe, right? He also has to have authority in that situation too. If he doesn't have authority, right? If he's just got responsibility with no authority, it's slavery. Because you have to do all the work and everything, but you don't get to make any decisions, right? That is effectively slavery, right? Unfortunately, a lot of marriages these days are that situation for the man. He needs to have that authority. So how does he build this respect? Like you said, early on in the relationship, from the very start, setting and establishing boundaries and reinforcing those boundaries if she ever gets too close to them or tries to cross those boundaries. So what am I talking about in terms of boundaries? It might be what is acceptable, and this is everybody's personal preference. I'm not saying that there's a one size fits all model, but what is it acceptable for your missus to post on her Instagram? Is it acceptable for your missus to post super scantily clad G-string lingerie photos on her Instagram for the whole world to see when she's your wife? Right? Is that a boundary? I would say, well, for me, it would be a yes. It would be like, you should be doing that, and I'd make that perfectly clear before it even happens. That's just one example, right? But you can do this with anything and everything in the relationship, but you have to have those boundaries, and you have to be, and she has to know that you'll enforce them too. Like, ultimately, unfortunately, it really all comes down to your willingness to walk away in the end. And that comes down to self-respect, right? If you have respect for yourself, where your boundaries are and what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not willing to tolerate, that's self-respect, which causes other people to respect you and adds gravitas to your position. Like, if you do this, sorry, I love you, my dear, but this is it. I have to walk away because this is my boundary and I have self-respect. Right?
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with that. I am always, even if it means breaking my own heart, I am always prepared to walk away if I'm being disrespected. If I'm dishing out respect morning, noon and night, and I'm putting my own boundaries in place, I always have the mindset, if I'm disrespected, and that's with business relationships, friendships, partners, I'm always prepared to walk away. I think I put pride first. And I think for men, that's important. It can really fucking sting because sometimes you got to cut off your nose to spite your face. But for the long term, I think if you look back and think, I've just spent the last 15 years allowing someone to disrespect me, I think that would chew you up even more than the initial sort of 2-year, 3-year heartache that you'd go through. So, yeah, always be prepared to walk away. That's my bit I'm slinging in there.
But why do people, let's break that down for a second. Why do people call that controlling? Why would you, like, in my opinion, that is just shaming language. It's a manipulation tactic to call a man in a relationship controlling because he has boundaries and he has self-respect. That's just plain manipulation. It's just word games. You know, there's nothing. It's not controlling because she has the choice to walk away as herself. So it's not. No one's putting a gun to her head and forcing her to like be in that relationship. I mean, in most cases, that's the case. She's not being forced violently to be there. She has a choice. Like, here's like, the train is going this way. Choo choo. Like, get on. Or not. Cool. You can get off at the next station if you want to. But the train is going this way. These are the tracks the train is on. These are the stops the train is making. Come along for the ride. It's going to be a great ride. Well, if you're not into it, then you can get off. That's fine. But no one's forcing her to be in that scenario, and no one's forcing her to accept those terms and conditions, those boundaries, right? So I reject this notion that is in any way controlling.
Yeah, if you're going to put boundaries in place, you also have to accept that there's going to be boundaries put in place for you.
And there will be.
And that's the fair exchange, which I think is what leads to a successful relationship. A lot of men, they can't understand women. They cannot read them. They may as well come from different planets. In fact, I think there's a book quoting that. However, when men and women split up, and I've seen this again time and time again, I'm like the friend that everyone comes to with their problems. And when a pair split up, I always know when it was over and how far back it went. So when the bloke comes up to me, he's like, one of my mates, Liam, she's just left me. I can't fucking believe it. Last week we was in Orlando together and everything was fine and we slept together in the lift and blah, blah, blah. And then we just unpacked the relationship. I'm like, man, she left you a year and a half ago.
Yep. I think women always, when a woman leaves a relationship, she has planned it a long time in advance. I think when guys break off a relationship, it's a case of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And it's like she just pushed too far. Or she does something that's irredeemable. You can't redeem her. She can't come back from it. It's a line that cannot be crossed. And so it's just like, all right, unfortunately, it'll break his heart, but he's got to press the exit button. Whereas women have a tendency to do what's called monkey branching, which is when a monkey's swinging through the jungle, right? It'll hang on to hold on to the first branch before it grabs onto the second before it let goes. Let's go and moves on. So women are very much the same. For women kind of already have the replacement picked out, the next guy picked out before they leave.
So what advice would you give to men? Because there's always a pivotal moment at all times where in a woman's mind, she starts to think, is this really what I want? And then patterns change, their habits change, their routines change, and the guy is too caught up in watching Match of the Day to even realise his wife is slipping away from him. Yeah. So what advice would you give to men? What action do they take to prevent their wife from cheating, or what signs do they need to look out for to basically know that their wife is playing away?
I have a friend who is like he's a divorce consultant. So lawyers come to him. He's like a forensic attorney, basically. So it's his job to go through. He actually works for women when they divorce rich men, and his job is to go through their assets and find the stuff that they were hiding, basically. And he consults on both ends, and he has this very interesting. This is not my concept. This is his concept. It's a very interesting thing called the blowjob test. And he basically sits the guy down and he says, okay, how often was your wife giving you a blowjob? And if it's like, if the answer is anything but like whenever I want, then he's like, that's the moment that stopped was when your relationship stopped. The moment the blowjob became a chore job is the moment that she is no longer attracted to you and she's losing respect for you. Because I think it's a bit of a broad litmus test, but I think it's a pretty accurate litmus test. It's like, because what does that represent? Like a blowjob from a woman's perspective is kind of like an act of submission. It's a purely selfless thing. It's purely for her man's pleasure, you know? So it's a giving thing. So if the dynamic for that becomes like she's eager to give them and wants to and is happy to please her man, if the dynamic changes from that to this is now a chore and this is something I'm going to use as leverage, perhaps, like, oh, if you do the dishes this week, I'll give you a blowjob. If you take the trash out, I'll give you a blowjob. You know, if it's your birthday, I'll give you a blowjob. If it becomes a negotiating tool, there's a big problem, and I think guys should be more cognizant of that red flag.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting theory, that. And you've probably been asked this question 101 times, and I'm sure this is a bone of contention in a lot of relationships. The woman having male friends and the man having women friends.
Right.
So would you allow your wife to have male friends, for example?
I know how to spot a guy who's what we would call like an orbiter. So a male orbiter is the dude who's been in the friend zone for the whole time he has known this woman. So he secretly wants to have sex with her, basically. So this male friend of hers, she may be due to ignorance, maybe she is aware of it, maybe she's not aware of it, whatever. She just considers him a friend, and he's a nice guy, he's great. He would never want to sleep with her. Now, if she texts him late at night, hey, I'm horny, come over, he's over that house in a second. Like from his, so it's a one-way attraction, let's say that. I can spot that very, very easily. If I'm with a woman and she's got a male friend, it doesn't take me very long to learn what the dynamic is there. If that guy's got like a wife and a girlfriend or whatever, and it's usually not a problem. But if the dude is what we would like an orbiter like that, like he's just lurking in the bushes, like waiting for his moment to strike, that's not a guy I want around my woman, because he's going to he will proactively try to sabotage our relationship. He's a snake. Like he will whisper shit in her ear when I'm not around, trying to denigrate me, to try and get her to break up with me. That is just what's going to happen, because that is his modus operandi. Now, on the other side of things, when a guy has female friends, as much as women are not going to like to hear this, her being jealous is a good thing. Because if other women are attracted to her husband, then she knows she picked a good one. And she got him. She bagged him. She won. She got the guy that all these other women want. Fantastic. She's the queen. Well done. You won. Now, she might feel pings of jealousy, but the unfortunate thing, the unfortunate reality of being a woman is that you need those pings of jealousy to respect your husband. You need to know that he is a wanted man. You need to know that he is an attractive man in order for you to maintain your attraction to him. This is the concept of pre-selection. It plays a big, big role in female attraction. You look as a perfect example of what we would call pre-selection is a celebrity. There's a lot of very, very ugly male celebrities, right? But they get endless throngs of women throwing themselves at them because they are in the limelight. Everyone is paying attention to them, and thus lots of women are paying attention to them, and thus they presume that they are attractive to lots of other women, so they are attracted to them. This is the basic concept of social proof. So when a guy and a husband has lots of, or just a few, whatever, female friends, even if those female friends aren't even remotely attracted to him, just by the virtue of him having female friends is going to be a positive influence on his dynamic with his woman. I guarantee it.
Do you know, based on that alone, that should inspire men to want to work hard in every realm and aspect of their life, because what you're saying is status wins.
It does. It ultimately. There's a lot of different things that can cause attraction from a woman, right? You could be good looking. You could be tall. You could have wealth. You could have a good social circle, right? Status is probably the thing that trumps absolutely all of that, right? Because if you think about it, if you have, let's say there's like 10, like mystery, intrigue, that's another thing that's very attractive to women, right? being able to speak, being confident. Another thing that's very attractive to women. We had like 10 different things that were all like attraction switches we can flip, right? They're either on or they're off. You could turn all 9 of the other ones off, but if you had social proof and status on, you're going to win. 9 times out of 10. It's the strongest one that there is. Because female attraction is outsourced to the crowd a lot of the time. Because this is the whole concept again of pre-selection, is like she doesn't know everything in the moment. Like when she's first interacting with you in that limited time, she can only learn so much about you in terms of your personality, your traits, your character, what you've got going on for yourself. So it's actually in her best interest to kind of outsource that to the crowd. So if other women find you attractive, well, they must know something I don't. They must have figured something else about him that I didn't quite factor in. I'm going to believe these other women. If they think he's attractive, then I must think he's attractive. It's the most high leverage thing that a man can do, is getting attention and status.
Let's talk about some of the attention you got within your porn industry. So, yeah, talk me through the journey of your porn career, why you got into it, and because you come out of it and you look back with regret.
Regret is it's a hard word. It's a hard word for me to use the word regret, because I've ended up in a place where I feel like I'm making a very positive impact on people. So if I was to regret that experience, it's hard. I wouldn't be where I am now. So I don't know what the word is.
I worded that.
I would say maybe repenting is a better word.
You're no longer an advocate for porn.
Definitely, 100%.
Okay,
yes,
so talk me through what made you think I want to do porn, and now you think actually I don't want to promote that shit.
Yeah. So if I'm being honest, there wasn't really much of a massive thought process into getting into it. I'd done the swinging thing, I'd done the escorting thing, and I was like, it was sort of the next. It was the thought process was really something like, what's the most ridiculous thing I can think of? What's the thing that everyone's going to tell me I can't do? I'm from a small town in rural southwest Western Australia, like 3,000 person farming town. Like, you're going to end up in LA banging like some of the most beautiful women on the planet? Really? That was basically it. I just like to prove people wrong. And so it was just sort of this would be a laugh. This will be fun. I'll have a good time. I'll have an enjoyable time with it. And if I can pull it off, it'll be a hell of a story to tell. That was about as far as the thought process went. And it worked. The plan, I had a plan. I kind of mapped out like a social hierarchy, if you will, of where I needed to go and who I needed to sort of work with. And it worked. Now, flash forward to, I got into porn 2016, 2017, roughly. And then 2021 was basically when I made my full-time exit. And a lot of things culminated in that, but a big part of it was the industry was very cancel culture heavy, which for an industry that's kind of based on free speech, it's kind of ironic. Like, their legal protections literally stem from a free speech case in the US. But because it's from California, because it's based in LA, it's got that woke culture attached to it. There's a lot of misandry, like a lot of man-hating going on in that industry, which is ironic, because their entire customer base are men. The industry doesn't exist without the male fan base paying for it. But you go to an AVN show, and you see the women, all these dudes lining up to get a porn star to sign a DVD for them and stuff. And then on Twitter or behind closed doors or on set, you see the way that these women talk about men in such a hateful and derogatory way, and such a disrespectful way. I'm like, so you think that about me as well? I'm a man. Like, why are all men are pigs? All men are this. All men are that. And you just I started to see a little of that. They were heavily pushing in 2020. They were heavily pushing the whole trans thing. There was two guys who'd shot straight porn for 15 years. And they were both, if I remember correctly, they were both on contract to a company at the same time. So they had to shoot the scenes that company made them shoot. And they kind of strong-armed them into doing a scene with a transsexual. There was 2 different instances of this in the space of a year. I thought, this is odd. This has never happened before. And prior to that, there was a somewhat related, but there was a porn star, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞, who ended up killing herself because she refused to do a scene. She found out that her scene partner was a guy who is what we call a crossover performer, which means he did gay porn and straight porn, right? And there are call me homophobic, call me whatever you want, there are significantly, statistically greater threats of health in regards to like people who shoot gay porn, or people who are gay in general. Like far greater instances of HIV transmission, far greater above, standard heterosexual sex. So that's what she was concerned with. And that's what a lot of girls in the industry up to that point were very concerned with. They were like, a lot of girls, this was the norm, would say we don't want to shoot with a crossover performer because we want to make sure we don't expose ourselves to the risk of HIV. She said that publicly on Twitter, and then she got torn to shreds on Twitter by, gay rights activists and whatever. And she ended up killing herself. And after that, you didn't see many women speaking up against, shooting with crossover performers. And I had friends who were crossover. Like, they were great guys. I got no problem against them and stuff. But it was like, but there's okay, cool. You can still there's still a reality. There's still a statistical probability of like HIV contraction. Like there's still a threat here. And nowadays they take things like PrEP, which is a drug which stops like the transmission and stuff. And it's like, cool. But you shouldn't bully people into like fucking you, basically. And I saw there was a lot of, I didn't like where that was heading. I just saw a lot of things like, I saw that. There was the 2 dudes being pressured into doing a trans scene. There was a lot of the man hate stuff going on. And there was, in addition to that, there was 2 other instances in that same year. One was like a director and one was a performer who had both been accused of sexual assault on set. And these women came out onto Twitter to make these allegations. They're like, so-and-so did this thing to me on set and it was sexual assault. Luckily, in both instances, there was a behind-the-scenes camera filming everything. So there was the main camera filming what the actual scene was, and then there was a behind-the-scenes camera filming the consent interviews and when they were taking a break and the battery was changing and everything that was happening behind the scenes. And in one of these cases, the woman was saying I was doing all these things I wasn't consenting to, and I was being forced to all this stuff, and I wasn't having a good time, et cetera, et cetera. And the behind-the-scenes footage completely exonerated the director. Like everything she said was a total fabrication, complete and utter bullshit. And then the other instance was a male performer, very famous one, had been shooting for 20 odd years or something like that. Luckily, he had a bunch of women on his, because he was very, very popular. He had a bunch of women coming to his defense. And again, the behind the scenes footage and the testimonies from everyone who was on set that day, verified that the woman accusing him was full of shit as well. And it's like, we got to this point where it's like, this is kind of all happening around the same time as Me Too and Trump and all this stuff simultaneously. So it was a big cultural thing. And I'm just seeing, like, I could go to set one day and if she's having a bad day, I could be accused of something that I didn't do. And I thought, I don't like what's going on here. I don't like where this is heading. And then as I started to make my way out and I started to get involved in the whole, what you would call the red pill manosphere side of the internet, I started to hear the stories of guys who had porn addiction problems, of guys who had all these issues from overconsumption of porn. And I started to dive into that, started to dive into things like, is it 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐵𝐿𝐵? I think that might be her name, who runs the website Trafficking Hub, who exposed all of the corruption and all of the child abuse material that was being run on the website Pornhub, and all the money that the CEOs of Pornhub were making from that, and the fact that they tried to cover it up so many times. Like sexual abuse victims had their material uploaded to Pornhub and they would contact Pornhub to get it taken down and they would ignore them. They would just gloss over it. It would get taken down. They would get put up again the next day. Like, it's just Trafficking Hub. If you go to traffickinghub.com, you can find this whole story. I believe it's 𝐬𝐫𝐫𝐽𝐻𝐫𝐲 her name. She's done a fantastic job exposing all this stuff. And that all came out at the same time. So it was just like this avalanche of just stuff that hit me. And I'm like, this is not an industry I want to be a part of anymore.
So you was hoping to get into an industry of
fun,
free love and fun,
yeah.
but it turned into a very toxic environment.
It was interesting.
Because I've seen this sort of man-hating movement appear on the internet, but in the porn industry, for example, I mean, we know that women get exploited. I mean, that's no secret. So, could you see the women that hated the men in the porn industry? Could you see their point of view?
I mean, I think a lot of I think those specific instances, a lot of it came from their personal experience with guys. And ironically, I'd seen this with a lot of the escorts that I was friends with back in Australia, where these women, on a lot of situations, are seeing the worst aspects of men, like in their clientele. They're seeing some, not all the time, but sometimes they're seeing some of the worst aspects of male nature. And so they develop a kind of the same way you might say a guy who gets just cheated on and rejected endlessly. He has a certain opinion of women because his experience of women has been nothing but negativity. These women were the same. All their experiences of men had been very disrespectful, very, I guess crossing boundaries, these kinds of things. Because they had money, they thought they could do certain things to her, which she didn't want them to do. So she's developed this very hard outer layer of resentment towards men, which I get. That makes sense. I'm sure if I was in her shoes, I would have ended up the same way, But when you have an industry with a large percentage of, which is mostly women, and a large percentage of them having that opinion, it just shapes the culture in a certain way. So I do sympathize with all the women who've been because there are definitely women who are in the porn industry who had abuse as a kid. There's 100% cases of that, and it's horrible. It's tragic. For a lot of them, porn is kind of their way of reclaiming their power. Right. You see that a lot. Women who had were abused as a kid, or maybe when they were adult, sexual assault, that kind of thing. This is a way for them to process that trauma. And oddly enough, a lot of them they process it through kink. They process it through things like BDSM,
pushing the boundaries.
But they're putting themselves back in a similar situation, but now they're in control. Because that's the thing with BDSM, the submissive is actually the one that has all the power. That's something you learn when you get into kink and stuff. Like they have the final say. Like with things like safe words. Like they are the ones who are ultimately consenting whether something progresses or it doesn't progress. So they a lot of women will process that trauma through a BDSM, experience where they feel like they're not in control, but they ultimately are in control. So they're able to sort of overcome that again. They're able to move on with their life through that stuff.
You see, this all sound probably mad to a lot of people, but it might make sense to some.
Yeah.
For such a natural thing, the sex industry itself, the porn industry, the actors and actresses, and the consumer, I can just see how that would lead to a whole bunch of PTSD, mental health problems, extended therapy, and sex just isn't meant to be that way. I
think with the advent of OnlyFans, we've opened up this Pandora's box.
What the fuck is OnlyFans?
So this thing, it was like the perfect storm because you had 2020 kicked in, COVID kicked in, everyone's on lockdown, no one can. You got all these men at home with nothing to do with their dick in their hand, and you got all these women at home who can't work, and they're like, "How can I make an extra buck?" Oh, there's this new thing called OnlyFans. Oh, this celebrity's doing it. Oh, now this celebrity's doing it. Oh, now this girl I know from college is doing it. Oh, this girl I know from college is doing it. Now everyone's doing it. Like there's some shocking numbers of like how many women in the US in particular have an OnlyFans account. Women under the age of like 25. It's a massive percentage.
Now it's being normalized, sensationalized.
Completely.
All Instagram accounts, they're all promoting their OnlyFans like it's the norm.
Well, you've got mainstream news outlets which have lost a lot of they lost a lot of credibility over the last 4 years anyway. But now they're pushing a lot of these stories like you mentioned, like the Bonnie Blues, like the Lily Phillips, like they're pushing these sensationalist stories like it's news. Like it's on the same it's coming from the same pages that would report on like, here's what the president said today. But now here's someone doing a 1,000-person gang or something. It's like so much has changed since 2020. It's unbelievable. Like the degeneracy has gone exponential. Everybody on earth, OnlyFans is a household name.
Well, coming from an ex-porn star, what are your views on Bonnie Blue?
For someone who is in that internet marketing world, she played the game better than most guys could ever play it. I know a lot of seasoned veteran internet marketers, and she beat them all. She has done something that they couldn't pay for. The amount of press that she got you would have to spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to get the same amount of press she got for free.
Okay, so from a PR point of view,
she's a genius.
We'll both agree that she's expert.
Yeah.
She sat opposite me. I've interviewed her, so I know how good she is at presenting herself.
Right.
But that doesn't detract from the fact that she is having hundreds, if what she says is true, over 1,000 men have sex with her in one day. I mean, as responsible adults, because she's maybe 10 years younger than us. Well, in fact, she's probably close to 20 years younger than us. I just feel compelled to be like, I'm not shaming you. We're all judging and we're all being judged. So I won't say I'm not judging you because I kind of am. 1,000 men fucking you in one day. I mean, seriously? That can't be good for your insides. That's going to fuck with your mental health down the line. You just don't know where that's going to lead to. Fun and games at the moment when you're on the front page of every magazine and you're in different countries bronzing yourself up and you've got all this money and you're buying Ferraris. But when all that dopamine stops and you're left an empty vessel with the memories of 1,000 different dicks going in and out of you, that's got to fuck with your head.
You have to have a certain mentality to engage in that in the first place. But
what about...
It's a chicken egg thing, right?
Yeah, I agree. What about the porn actresses? Sort of, like back in the 80s where you had the Hollywood porn scene and you just get the same actors and actresses just sort of rotating around it as all a fun club. But they all ended up with drug habits. I mean, John Holmes ended up with there's a film on him, Wonderland. He ended up with a heroin habit. He ended up dying young. There's a couple of other really famous females that they end up smoking crack or getting on the brown. It's like... Well, you clearly weren't having as good a time as you appear to be having.
Yeah, just from the women that I know, I'd say that's the exception, not the rule, honestly, in terms of what percentage of them end up in a situation like that. It's not an overwhelming percentage of them. Now, don't be me wrong, a lot of them do coke, when they're partying and stuff. It's LA, they're doing coke. The weird trend that I noticed there's been 3 guys at this point that male performers that I knew in the industry when I was working in LA who have died since I left, and they all died in an accident. They all I think 2 of them were in motorcycle accidents, and one of them fell down a flight of stairs in a hotel. And I'm like, and it was just, and that's not the first time. There's been plenty of other instances of the male actors dying in this way, and that got me thinking what's the common denominator here? And it seems to be this aversion to risk, they don't process risk the same way that the average person does, hence the willingness to get into an industry like that, right, and engage in porn in the first place. Maybe that's why I do it. Maybe I was very risk averse, not afraid of risk. So I think that's it must be a common trait amongst all porn stars, I think.
Well, here's one then. Let's put the boot on the other foot and go back to what you specialise in. Educating and advising men on how to become better lovers and more confident. So let's just say you had those 1,000 men visit you at once that all slept with Bonnie Blue the same day.
Get an STD test.
Yeah, I mean, what would you say to them? I mean, I know what I would say to them, but you're the star of the show today. So what would you say to those men?
Well, I don't really know if I have to say anything. I understand. I already know why they did it. They are coming from a place of, they have a lack of abundance in their life. An opportunity like that presents themselves, they're like, okay, free pussy. They jump on it. Now, there's a whole bunch of STD health risks associated with an event like that. So they should all have gotten themselves tested by now, hopefully.
What would you say to Mr. 998?
998. By the time it got to you where you're not having second thoughts, that's probably what I've been thinking. It's like, do you get like a ticket? How does this work? Do you like go to the back of the queue and you're just waiting for your number?
It's time to bail out.
Were people like paying to like skip the queue and jump in front? You know?
See, for me, I'd have to say to all of them, lads, get a fucking grip. You do not want to be a part of that shit because that is, for me, that's really dark. That's giving your soul away.
If there was something I'd want to get into their head, it would be like, yeah, you are clearly in a place where you feel like you have zero abundance with women at all, where you're going to jump on that opportunity like that. So you should definitely, it's a sign to you that you should certainly start to develop a sense of abundance with women. Like there's clearly things you need to do where you don't feel so desperate.
Something's missing.
Yeah, and I think that missing thing is what we would call abundance.
Yeah. So from OnlyFans, you're good friends with Andrew and Tristan Tate. So it's probably only right to touch base on the relationship there. I won't ask too many questions because I will one day want to sit down with both them brothers and I'll have lots to ask them. And I'll leave it there. But how did that relationship form? Because by this stage, when you become friends with them, I'm sure you left the porn industry.
That was kind of at the exact same time. Yeah, well, that was happening pretty much at the exact same time.
And you probably would have been frowning upon the OnlyFans side of
life. It was in a sort of 6-month period roughly when I met them and I decided to walk away from the porn industry, and I was starting to learn more about guys with porn addiction and these kind of problems. And I actually met them through Twitter of all places. Me and Tristan got into like a bit of a back and we actually had a disagreement about like the European porn industry because I've worked in the European porn industry and he's doing webcam stuff and he was doing webcam stuff in Romania or whatever. So we had like a bit of a back and forth on Twitter. It was very cordial and I invited him on my show and I interviewed him. And then we started to talk about the webcamming stuff and how that all worked. And I never really got into that side of things, the whole webcamming stuff. So it was interesting to me to learn like, okay, how does this work? Because I know that because it seemed like the webcam girls were the smart ones compared to like the porn stars, because the webcam girls were making their income was dependent upon them, not dependent upon a studio and an agent, and they were keeping a lot more of it than the porn stars. They didn't have to do any of the actual sex that the porn stars had to do. So it was a very interesting perspective on like the different models of the adult entertainment industry. So I think, and they mastered that game. They mastered it.
Are they the devils that the mainstream media proclaim them to be?
No. You can love them, you can hate them, but they're not. As we are sitting down here talking, they've not been charged. They've never been committed of a crime. Like they're not. They've been facing, the Romanian legal system for shit's gone on like at least 2 years now. Because I see people who have a big problem with the Tates. They'll always, bring up all these different clips of Andrew being bombastic on the internet, and it's like, look, he's admitting to human trafficking. He's admitting to this. He's admitting to that. Well, if that is him admitting to human trafficking, why is he not in jail? Surely that would have put him in jail by now. Well, the reason he didn't put him in jail is because he's not a human fucking trafficker. That's my opinion on the whole thing. And there's a big working with your girlfriend. Employing your girlfriend in a webcam studio isn't human trafficking, as far as I'm like. That's it. It's clearly not the legal definition of it, but it's also not it's not what I would consider human trafficking when people talk about human trafficking. Like we know if you go on a Pornhub, well, luckily not now, but prior to like the trafficking hub investigation, you could literally find instances of women who were human trafficked and their material, that content was put on Pornhub, and Pornhub was making money off of human trafficking. That is a legal fact that has been precedented. But these guys are not guilty of these crimes. You can hate them all you like, and they love to be hated. They love to say things that pisses people off because they know everyone will just endlessly talk about them.
Well, they've now got the UK that want to extradite them.
Yep.
They've just recently landed in the States.
DeSantis doesn't like them.
And now Florida want to drag him over the coals and investigate him. How do you think it's going to end for them brothers?
They're very persistent. They're very stubborn. They love a fight. They will fight it tooth and nail. until the very, very end. They're not going to run away from the case. I know that for a fact. They're not going to run away. They're going back. They're going to go back to Romania, face the charges, go through the due process, because they want to beat it. Like they want that to be the story. They want that to be part of their legacy. You can see that in them, like, because it would be a monumental victory for them to face all of these different jurisdictional charges and to beat every single one of them and come out on top of it. It's like the ultimate challenge. So then they're not going to run. But I don't think they're going to run away from it at all. I think they're going to fight up to tooth and nail to the very end. And I think this shit could go on for another 5 years.
And you think because, Andrew in particular, because he's been prodding the bear for so long, that it's done him kind of fall on his own sword.
Yeah, I think he knew what he was doing. Andrew's a very calculated guy.
Well, if you think Bonnie Blue is good at marketing,
Andrew's better.
Andrew Tate is a different league, isn't he?
Andrew's better.
Yeah.
Like anyone who thinks they're good at marketing should be studying the Tates and what they do. They're masters at it.
Yeah, they don't care whether they're liked, loved, or hated, do they?
Well, precisely, and that's one of the things that Andrew recognised early on is that we're in an attention economy. He recognised this 4 years ago. So if you can get people's eyeballs on you, there is money to be made. Even if those eyeballs hate you, there's still amplifying your signal, amplifying your message to people who will like you, who will resonate with your message.
And there is a downside to that. So, funny enough, today Andrew's made the headlines again. So there's a crime that's resurfaced. There was a guy that split up with his girlfriend. The girlfriend's father was a famous BBC presenter, I believe. But long and short of it is, 2 weeks after his girlfriend split up with him, he went and murdered his girlfriend's sister, and the mum. And today I've seen over the headlines that he was fueled by Tate's content. So that's unfair.
Go through that guy's search history. How many other people did he watch in his entire life on YouTube?
Oh, for the record, I'm not saying Tate had anything to do with that, but I'm just saying if you keep prodding the bear, they will start linking you to stuff to plant subconscious seeds in people's minds. And the thing is, there's enough to sort of have big debates with him over a lot of stuff that's out there, which I'll wait until I speak to him both, because I'm sure it will happen. And the truth always comes out in the end.
Yeah. If anything, like guys like Andrew or myself or my friend, like any one of my friends in the Red Pill Manosphere space, they're pushing men in the opposite direction. And this goes back to what I said earlier, where I was talking about the guy who, gets cheated on and develops, resentment towards women. What we're trying to, not, specifically just Andrew, but pretty much everybody who talks about male-female relationships in the Red Pill Manosphere space, we're trying to get guys to understand female nature so they don't do that. Because that guy is the guy who doesn't expected women to behave a certain way, and then they behaved completely differently, and he was so blindsided by it that he just lashed out violently. We're trying to prevent that by waking guys up and showing them true female nature. It's not all flattering, but male nature isn't perfect. Like, male nature has a light side and a dark side. Male nature, you have the light side of being a protector, a provider for their family. Then you have the dark side, which is men are more violent. Men can be Machiavellian. We accept that there are light and dark sides to men. But for some reason, people if you say that there's a light and a dark side to women, you're called a misogynist. You're called a woman hater. Like, no, women can be loving and nurturing and feminine and the mothers and literally the birthers of civilization. But they can be emotionally manipulative too. They can be cold. They can be disrespectful. And it's okay. You don't hate women for what they are. Accept them for what they are. The guy who goes out and does something horrendous like that is the guy who is in denial of female nature. His understanding of female nature is what he was told by Hollywood, which is completely arse backwards. I'm not saying I agree with what he did. It's not the right thing that he did. But I see the path. I see how he got there. Because he was told one thing, reality was completely different. He didn't know how to handle his emotions, and he just spurged out violently. Instead of associating people like me or anyone in the red pill manosphere space as being like woman haters and misogynist and dangerous, how about you consider the fact that we've probably prevented that shit from happening more than anyone on earth. We've probably prevented more violent outbursts from like lonely men than any other group on the planet. So maybe a bit of gratitude would be nice.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see that triple murderer hang. And just to cap off the Andrew Tate thing before I then ask you the final question, as somebody that knows Andrew and Tristan Tate better than probably anybody watching this interview, in your opinion, are Andrew and Tristan innocent or guilty?
I'd say they're innocent. Yeah. In my time around them, I've never seen anything that would indicate, and just, behind closed doors, I've never seen anything that would indicate any of the things they've been charged with. I've hung out with and met some of the women that they've, that are in their life. No indication of this whatsoever. And again, 2+ years of criminal investigation into this, and everyone is saying, "Oh, he's admitting guilt left, right, and center, everywhere on the internet." Why isn't he in jail? Because they've got nothing they can pin on him. Because he hasn't committed a crime. Him and Tristan haven't committed crimes. So these crimes are being accused of sexual assault and human trafficking and stuff. That's not the Andrew and Tristan that I have met. So yeah.
Okay. So final question. I could have spoke to you for hours. What would your final message be to men out there that have stuck with this interview in the hope to get some value from it, that are struggling with women? What would your final message to them be?
My final message is tiger got stripes. Don't expect a woman to be something that she's not, and you will not be disappointed with women. You will not be resentful towards women, and you will have far better success with women if you understand them better. They are not these confusing, mysterious beings. It's very easy to have a harmonious, happy relationship with women if you understand female nature better. And so that's what I want for men. I want them to have a happy relationship with their women. And then the women are ultimately happy. And then the families they create are ultimately happy. And then the communities that those families create are happy. And then the society we create from those communities is ultimately happy. It's a knock-on chain of things. But it starts with actually understanding women better.
Well, I hope this has brought some value and other thoughts and perspective to the audience. And if you've made it this far, please remember to like and subscribe to this channel, because the bigger the channel, the more interesting guests we can have. Sterling's flown in from Australia, and I doubt he would have done that if we'd had 5 subscribers. So thank you to ones that have already. And if you haven't, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. And as for you flying in from Australia to share this time with me, I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a good stay while you're over here.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Cheers, mate.